My name is Sonal Santosh Babirwal, and I'm doing my PhD at Dublin City University, Ireland, under the supervision of Dr. Shirley Coyle. And I would be presenting my protocol to test and investigate motor imagery training using different medium. So the overview of the presentation is that we start with the introduction and the basics, and then we have the methodology, and then we discuss the results, and then we have the discussion about the entire study and the future work. Next slide, please. So talking about brain computer interface systems, it's a direct communication between like brain's electrical activity and any external device, let it be a computer or a robotic limb or a wheelchair. And there are different type of signals that are considered while designing a BCI system, and few of them are like motor imagery, P300, and event related potentials. My research is more focused on motor imagery based BCI systems, which is like an intuitive interface that is that provides control for applications directly from your brain activity without the requirement of any external stimuli. Next slide, please. Um, So here a figure represents about like the motor cortex and the somatosensory cortex, which are responsible for the motor imagery activities in a human brain. So for instance, when we imagine the movements of hands or feet without actually performing the movement, it is known as motor imagery signals. And mostly it is found into the motor cortex, and the channels associated with it are C3, CZ, and C4. And the fun fact is that the left side of our brain controls the right side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. And that's how we associate the channels and take into consideration while the analysis. Next slide. Next slide, please. So this is a diagrammatic representation of a motor imagery based BCI system where the signals, raw signals are collected and then they are cleaned, and then the features are extracted and further classified into, let's say, the difference between left and right hand movement imagination or both hands and feet imagination, and that is used as a command to operate something like an exoskeleton. Next slide, please. A well-known training. So these sort of systems, they need training. So a well-known training paradigm is GRASS BCI paradigm, which is shown in this figure, where like a cross appears, and then there is this cue, which is like either a left or an right arrow shows, and that's when you start the imagination of left hand or right hand movement. Here we'll take an example of left and right hand movement, and then there is a pause, and so the entire trial lasts for 9 seconds. Next slide, please. So when it comes to motor imagery signals, the pros of this is that we do not require external visual stimuli, and we use mental strategies to control the interfaces. But the cons is that it requires extensive training, and then there is an ineffective communication due to low discrimination capacity. So this is where training comes in handy, where a good training can actually make a difference. Next slide, please. So the evidence in the literature supports that medium and the cue of presentation for training are equally important. So initially we have seen like the training which is happening on the screen, and then there is literature that also supports audio-based cues where like you hear instructions and audios, or functional electrical stimulations where you get stimulation as cues on like when you attach sensors to your body, or there are cues which are based on virtual reality when you wear VR headsets. Next slide, please. So here's the question, like do mediums have an influence on training, and what are the possible modes if we involve BCI systems in day-to-day life, and that would require training. Next slide, please. That's where we come up with this protocol where we design a methodology where goes through a training uh, like the GRASS BCI training, but using different setups. For instance, the cues are presented into VR system, the cues are presented over a screen, and then the the cues are presented over audio with the help of speakers. And every subject goes through all these three trainings in a particular sequence using William Latin square design to avoid the nuance factor and the learning factor, and to understand how participants perform better in one particular medium. So in this methodology, like at the first second, there is like the instruction happening, like where like you see the cross or both hands. And then at the fourth second, you get an instruction where you have to imagine either left or right hand movement for 2 seconds. And then the protocol, then the person has to relax in the protocol. Next slide, please. So using William Latin square design, what is happening is a subject one first goes through the training using screen, audio, and then VR. Second subject goes through audio, VR, screen, and then the third subject goes to through VR, screen, and audio. In this way, we sort of eliminate the learning effect from every subject to see what is the best medium to perform this kind of training. Next slide, please. So here we to analyze this, we use band power features, which is since motor imagery gets operated between 8 to 12 hertz, which is mu rhythms, and beta rhythms, which is between 16 to 24 hertz, and using the channels C3 and C4 respectively. And we use event related synchronization and desynchronization, which is increase and decrease of power in specific regions with respect to baseline, which is when no activity was performed. Next slide, please. So the results show that comparing the mean ERDS values of different mediums, the participants perform better using VR medium as compared to other medium when it comes to just analyzing the signals. Next slide, please. Okay, so how will this affect the classification when we have to operate something like when we feed this through machine learning, if we have to operate something? So we use the machine learning pipeline where the raw EEG signal is first cleaned, and then the ERD and ERS values are further passed through machine learning classifiers. Next slide, please. So the five algorithms have been tested, which is random forest, KNN, linear discriminant analysis, support vector machine, and logistic regression. So taking the features, the study suggests that the KNN algorithm performs best with an accuracy of 68.8% for VR medium, which means when the participants were wearing the VR headset, their accuracy to discriminate between the left and right hand signals of imagination was perfect during this. Next slide, please. Um, this is the result of ANOVA test within the algorithmic groups. So the results from screen, VR, and audio was given to all the classifiers to see the variability within the group. And then it suggested that it rejected the null hypothesis that there is a variance in rest of the algorithms, but it showed like a significant difference in KNN. Next slide, please. So to conclude the study, it suggests that the participants perform better when the cues were presented into the VR medium, and the KNN performed best with an accuracy of 68% when the training was done using VR headsets. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you, and I'm open to questions.